Alright, welcome to my Ultimate Swarm Guide. Now in this video we are going to be covering absolutely everything that you see on screen right now. So whether you've played the game before, whether you haven't touched it before, there should be something that all of you can learn. And yeah, let's get into it. Now when you first go into Swarm, you should be greeted by a screen that looks like this, and if you select your champion, you'll probably only have Jinx and Seraphine available. You will unlock the rest of them through objectives while playing and completing at different difficulties. So let's get into the objective. So you've got the objectives button just above upgrades on your right, and they come in 4 sections. You've got AS, which is the easiest mode. That's the normal story missions that you first load in. Then you've got the 2-star and the 3-star, which is hard and extreme. And you've got the book at the bottom for just some more miscellaneous quests, which give you a little amount of gold, but they also give you some augments. And then you can spend the gold that you get through objectives and in-game on these upgrades here. Now, I've maxed every single one of them, but what I would recommend is to prioritize gold and experience to begin with, and then get ability haste and crit chance, because these affect every single champ, no matter who they are. Ability haste even affects your auto attack, but we'll get into that later. And after you've completed all of them, you have that anema power, which is basically the end game upgrade. And then on to the maps and difficulties. At the very start, you will have the AS difficulty story, which is easy, and you'll only have Warehouse District unlock. Once you have completed the first map and beaten the boss, you unlock the outskirts, subterranean, and then beachhead. After you've completed it all on easy, you unlock hard, complete it all on hard, and you unlock extreme difficulty, which is the final difficulty, which before you've maxed all of your stuff is actually really hard. So it's a good challenge. Now we're going to go over each champion and what they do. So Jinx's auto attack is just the missiles from her gun, as you can see, just the bullets. Her R is here. You can press anywhere in a certain radius, which is normally the size of your screen and then some, which fires a massive rocket. The E, which I fired at that elite, is just a barrage of rockets. And the passive, which made me run fast, happens every 75 kills. Now, Seraphine's auto attack is just the waves that you see coming off. Sometimes there are 2 waves. She has a 25% chance of doing that. The E is her shield and movement speed. And the R, which you just saw, is just basically a massive shockwave, which damages all enemies. Alright, on to Leona. She is the first melee champ that you get to play in Swarm, and is probably the tankiest champ in the game. Her passive scales off her armor, health, and health regen and gives you bonus area size, which we'll get into, but that can work with the items that you can get in the shop here, like Radiant Field, can work with area size, and also her auto attack, which is the shield slam that you see right there. Her E raises her defenses, gives her armor, and gives her health, a little shield, and then does damage to nearby enemies. She can run into a massive group, basically tank it all and do damage. Her R, she calls down a solar flare, which leaves that print on the floor, the lion print, and also leaves behind burn that stays on the ground for however many seconds. Any enemies walk inside of it get burnt, but also it stuns, so it can be a good defense for when taking down bosses. You got the stampede guy chasing you, the seahorse, which is coming in right here. If I just use my R and my E here, it does ridiculous damage and also stuns him. If you run into him, he does hit you, but it's good for a getaway. And next on the list is another mega tank. We got here Alawi. Alawi's passive is that people who are around Alawi's tentacles gain a certain amount of health regen depending on how many tentacles are in the area. So you can heal up massively if you have an Alawi in your team. Her E, Tentacle Smash, is just a tentacle firing in a line, which does damage and also knocks up enemies. Her R, which is just basically her R in normal league, is absolute chaos. She slams the ground, 6 tentacles spawn around her, and will just keep slamming enemies. If she has projectiles added, which you can get through upgrades and passives in the game, that will add to the amount of tentacles that spawn. Her auto attack is just slamming the ground and then having tentacles spawn periodically. So she's just very good for just controlling an area. Next up we have Briar, which is one of my personal favorites. Briar's all about percentage, max health, scaling with health, missing health. So her passive is that she gains damage and movement speed based on missing health. So the lower Briar is, the more damage she does and the faster she can move. Her E, which you're seeing on screen right now, is basically she just beelines it to a target and will just relentlessly attack them without you having to press any buttons. The bar below the character that you can see, the orange bar that is going down, if you've got to recast E before that goes completely, and you do a massive swipe that you can see on the screen, which damages enemies and also heals you for a percentage health. Now the R, which I've just fired, you can actually, it's a global ult, so I've pressed on the map at the Yumi, and I'm going to travel the entire way, and you basically just get taunted like your E, and then you go into a frenzy, and then you can recast it again to cancel it. All right, now we got Yasuo. He is all about crit. His passive is that it just gives him 15% bonus crit. His Still Tempest, which are the tornadoes coming off his auto attack, scale with crit, and that is his pretty much whole kit. That is his damage. His E, which is the dash that you can see there, gives him a shield and a brief moment of invulnerability. And then his R, which is the wind wall there, can block off all enemies, no matter the size. It also blocks off the stampede people. And as you can see me demonstrating here, the E can go over walls as well. So if you need a cheeky escape, then you can just dash out of there. But the main thing to mention here is that his Still Tempest is just basically a must pick every time in the shop. That is 100% of his damage. Now, Riven is probably the most unique champ in the whole of Swarm, and that is because she doesn't have a generic auto like everyone else does. You can normally press C, which makes it so you auto-aim or you aim where you're going with your mouse, but Riven is purely based on movements. The bar you can see going up, the white bar, only happens when you move. If you stop moving, she doesn't do her auto-attack. But anyway, her passive is basically she does increased damage based on the distance she is away from the target. So if she's right on top of him, she does 15% more damage, up to 0% being further away. She also gains a shield equal to 25% of the damage that she's dealt, which is insane, which is why some Rivens just never die. Her E basically dashes her in a forward direction and stuns enemies. And her R, which you're seeing on screen right now, just she gets empowered for 15 seconds, gaining bonus movement speed and reduces the cooldown of her hops. Now, Aurora's the newest champion in League of Legends, and she's actually available in Swarm. She has a very unique interaction with her auto attacks here. If you have the C enabled, which basically means the target is just automatic, she only does it in a cone of 3. But if you allow your cursor to decide the movement of her auto attacks, you can move them around the screen, hitting loads of enemies, so it's definitely worth to do that. She basically works off experience as like a support who can stay alive and revive people. Her E makes her invulnerable for 2.5 seconds, and during this invulnerability state, if she runs through enemies, she does damage to them. Her R, which you can see I just popped here, puts her in a displacement field, which if you go from one end to another, does damage to the enemies and can also knock up enemies, and she's invulnerable while she's traveling from side to side. And Aurora's passive is that every 7 levels she summons a spirit that follows her path, and these basically do continual damage to enemies and also slows enemies. That's where you can see that random like ghost spirit thing behind me on the map. Xayah's probably my favourite champ to play right now, and that's just because the E is so satisfying. But let's start from the top. Her passive is that she permanently gains 1000 pickup radius when worked with her E, and all XP, orbs, and gold that she picks up when she presses her E that travels through monsters actually deal damage to them, which is insane. Every single 200 orbs and or gold that she picks up, she gets a boost for 15 seconds, which grants her 80 ability haste and enhances her weapon, giving it +1 projectile count. The ability haste works so well here because that is basically attack speed, so that goes well with the projectile count added as well because you're firing a lot more fast. Her E, which is her blade caller, you've seen a couple times, is basically every single time you have an auto attack you put a blade on the floor and the E drags all the blades back, which is what brings the XP and gold to you, but also does damage to enemies, and this also can stun enemies. So if you're fighting a boss and you need to stun them, if you've got the stampede guy, the seahorse chasing you, fire a couple auto attacks in his direction, press E, and he will stay still. Her R is basically a get out of jail free card, which I just used a second ago. Once you use it, you go up in the air, go invulnerable and gain massive movement speed. You can then get out of the area and then recast again with E. Your E immediately comes off cooldown if you press R, because you put all your feathers out in a circle, and then you can just draw them back in to kill the enemies. Yeah, she has a pretty wavy kit. Here's the example with the seahorse. You pull it back. Well, I mean, he died in one hit, but he would have been stunned had he not been dead. Now we know what all the champions do, let's actually get into the game. So you'll notice at the bottom in your HUD, you'll have 6 blank boxes just above your HUD and 4 beneath, which are all grayed out, there's nothing in them. When you first start the game, you will only have 3 blank boxes at the top, and the remaining 3 will have locks on them. You unlock the remainder of these passives throughout playing the game. But essentially, what happens is that you'll level up and you'll get the option to pick a passive, or an ability or a weapon. Now, what these do is they work in conjunction with each other. The abilities or the weapons can only evolve and get stronger if you have the right passives. And you can find this by pressing tab or looking up online, but tab is a quick shortcut in-game, and on the left-hand side, you'll see a list of all of the passives, and beside them will be the weapons or abilities that work with that to evolve. So what you want to do by the end of the game is you want to have passives that match up to the weapons as much as you can, so you can have the strongest build. Now, of course, this won't happen every single time. This is somewhat luck, and that's because you've only got a certain amount of slots, and when you start out the game, you don't have any rerolls in the shop. Later on, you earn rerolls for objectives and completing missions, which give you more chances, but even then, your build is never 100% secure. To make this easier to understand, let's use this shop example right here. So as you can see on the bottom of my screen, I've already pressed on the damage passive, so I've already unlocked that. I have no slots used up in my weapons or abilities. So as you can see on the right, anti-shark mine, it says new because I haven't pressed it, and it's got the little upgrade with damage at the bottom, which basically means if I get anti-shark mines, I am able to evolve that because that evolves through damage, and I have the damage passive. So if you find abilities or weapons in your shop that have the upgrade symbol with the 2 arrows and then the passive icon, that means you should probably go for it if you've got no other options, as that can be evolved, and evolved weapons are always better than ones that aren't. Now, I've just realized that I've been talking about evolved weapons, but haven't actually said how you evolve weapons. So basically, every time you get an item in a shop, you'll see the level that it is. That is the amount of times you've pressed on it. Every single passive can go to level 5, and that's the max it can go. You can't evolve passives. Every single weapon can also go to level 5. That's the highest level. But after level 5, there's a certain card that you can pick up off the floor, like you just saw in that screen, in that shot right there, that allows you to evolve it. You can only evolve items and weapons after they've reached level 5. And you can't evolve them through leveling up, because leveling up gives you 3 options. That gives you the option on the left, right, and middle, and that's options that you've already have if you've filled up all your passives and item slots. If you pick up a card, which are dropped through bosses, Belveth quests, and elites, then you can evolve items. If you have nothing to evolve, it will only give you an item you currently own in order to level it up. Now, understanding which weapons to go for in a game can be a bit confusing to start out. I've come to my own conclusion that I believe that the Battle Bunny crossbows, the Moon Blast, the Ubu Blaster, the blades are all like the strongest in the game, so I kind of go them for every single person that I play. Even now when I'm playing Leona, I barely even go for the defensive stuff like the Ice Blast that some people say are best in slot on tier lists and websites. I just kind of go damage for everyone because that's how I enjoy to play the game. So there is no right or wrong answer per se. Play whatever you find fun, or look up guides to find best in slots for specific champions. For example, Briar works off health, so she would get max health as a passive, which may make her go down a different route. And Yasuo, for example, crit is a necessity for him, so he would need crit for his Steel Tempest, his basic attack to evolve. So therefore, it makes sense to go for the Battle Bunny crossbow and the Moon Blast because they evolve with crit. So it's just about finding synergies that work for you or work for your favorite champ and following guides. Now let's get into the type of enemies that you're actually going to be seeing in Swarm. There's 4 different enemy types. You've got the normal enemies, you've got the elites, you've got mini bosses, and then you've got the bosses. The normal enemies are the ones that spawn in abundance. They are the ones with the smallest amount of health, albeit some of them get quite tanky towards the end. Pretty much all of these are melee only as well, apart from one, which is this guy on the screen right here. He can get a bit jarring later on, although he doesn't do too much damage. The elite version of him does a lot of damage, however, but we'll get into the elites in a second. And then you got these guys, the toxic toads. This is basically Gromp, and they don't actually do much damage. It's what they leave behind. Once you kill them, they leave a toxic little trail on the floor, and if you step on it, you take a lot of damage. The Chumper, you're not really going to see a lot of. It's mostly for Yumi quests, but he basically doesn't attack you. He just has a lot of gold, so if you kill him, you get a lot of gold as a reward. Look at him dancing. Now onto the spider shots. These are the first of the mini bosses. that you can come up against. It's basically ergot, and they fire missiles from each of the legs, so all you got to do is stay in between the legs, and they're fairly easy to take down. You got the Beetle, aka Nocturne, who basically just project their dashes with a bunch of red lines on the floor, and you just have to avoid the dash, because if you get hit by them, it does a lot of damage. But you can just wait for their dash to end, and then kill them once they're standing still. The Crusher's next up on the list, and he's only really a threat if you're a melee champ. He basically slams the ground if you get too close to him, but it's quite predictable as there's a massive red circle that appears, but it does a lot of damage and knocks you up. The Belcher, now this is just Cogmore. He doesn't do any melee damage to you, he just fires an artillery. Again, red circles appear on the map, but they're quicker than the Crusher, so if you're not constantly moving, you could get hit. Now the Seahorse basically just runs at you full speed and chooses one target until it hits you. And when it hits you, it does a lot of damage, so the idea is to keep running or try stun it. And then on to the final ones, which are the main bosses. These are the bosses that you fight after the 15 minutes are up at the end of every single game, if you make it that far. On the first map, the main boss is Rek'Sai. I'm not going to go into too much detail about them because you want to fight them for yourself. The second boss is Briar, which actually isn't on the screen. For some reason, she doesn't have a little video image rotation thing in the database. I don't know why, maybe because she's one of the champs as well. The third boss is Belveth, which you can see on the screen now, on the subterranean map. And the final boss is Aatrox. He's kind of the poster boy for Swarm, if you will. He's the main villain in the cinematic and the one on basically the homepage. Also the hardest boss, but that would make sense because he's on the hardest map. XP and leveling up. Alright, so the leveling system in this game, as far as we're aware, it scales infinitely, but you can't actually reach that far because obviously you've got a 15-minute game timer. The highest level I've been to is level 45, but just based off pattern, I've put it up to level 51 on this chart just to make it even. The level that you need to reach in order to max out all your passives and evolve all your abilities is level 40. That's because you get 19 cards throughout a game, which I'll get into after this, and you level up 40 times. So that equates to 59 levels. But you start at level 1 with 1 point already in your auto attack or your passive ability. So you only need 59 points to level up to max. You can get to level 45 or so, and then after that point, you don't get stronger as far as I'm aware. You just are able to either heal yourself or pick gold once you're fully built. And that's a good way to basically farm gold, is just you get max level really quick and get XP. I would recommend basically getting XP every single game, as there are some games where none of my team got it and we were playing in a 4, and we struggled to even reach level 35, so we're 5 levels off max. You can still evolve everything in those games, but that just means your passives aren't going to be maxed out. Alright, next up we're going to be covering encounters, and more importantly, Battle Bunny boons. So these ones are MF encounters. You'll see a Misfortune little figure standing on the floor with this glowing brightness around it, and that basically means there's a power-up. On the left of the screen, you can see all of the power-ups and what they do. Some are a lot better than others. The one at the top, Anima Supercar, is the best one by a landslide. You basically one-hit every normal enemy on the map. You can 1 or 2 hit most mini-bosses and elites. And elites are unbelievably tanky, so it's great to take them down. Lucky if you get one of those. The one that I get in this game is the Fireball, which is another unbelievable one to take down bosses. But in general, anytime you see one of these, you want to run over to it because they will despawn in about 30 seconds to a minute. Yumi quests. Now, if you look on the bottom right on the minimap, you can see that Yumi icon. These will appear in your game. They'll appear 3 times a game, I believe. All of the games that I've played, I've only seen them 3 times. However, if you press tab, you can actually see there are 4 augment slots. So basically what Yumi quests are, is it will give you a little trial to do. The trials vary. You can have one like this, which is basically rolling this yarn around and killing enemies with it. You've got a minute to do so. Some can be destroying vases. And there's other ones like picking up cardboard and bringing it back. It's just random little mini games, and at the end, once you've completed it, you'll have the option to select an augment. Now, augments are different to weapons and passives because they don't take up any of them slots, and they can greatly increase different types of your game. For example, Juggernaut on the left there would work really well with Leona because she wants to build armor and health, and that will increase her damage. There are some which are specific for like crit, so Yasuo would be great because his passive is crit. Others like Cross Country, which is probably the most overpowered one in the game right now. So if you see that one, pick that one up. That works really well with Riven. But the list is huge. You can either play the game and find the augments for yourself, or you can look them up on the Swarm wiki to see which augments there are, because I can't put all of them on the screen. The list is too big. I wouldn't be able to display them all. And the final encounter is Belveth quests. As you can see on the screen right now, these are red icons that appear on the map, a Belveth face, and unlike Yumi quests, they don't take 30 seconds to spawn. Once they've appeared on the map, they are there immediately and you can do the trial. These are a lot more challenging than Yumi quest in some aspects. Some of them can be easier, late game at least, because you can one-shot stuff. But it will basically just entail surviving in an area, dodging meteors, killing a boss, and stuff like that. Once you've completed the quest, you'll get a massive burst of XP, which I recommend picking up first before picking up the card in the middle, because I'll explain the card mechanic after this when we go into actual timings of things. But essentially, the XP gives you the options to pick stuff that you already have or choose new ones, and the card in the middle will always give you something that you already have to level up. Alright, now to get into the details of the specific spawn timings. I took a recording over 5 games and made note of every time that something spawned, of the encounters, the bosses, the elites, and what I came to the conclusion of is that the first Yumis always get announced at the exact same time, 1 minute 15. They spawn in 30 seconds later at 1:45. The Yumis after that aren't exact, but they're around the same time. As you can see there, we got 6 minutes 18, 6:23, 6:19, 6:18, and 6:25, spawning 30 seconds later. Then we've got the elites, which spawn at the same time every single game. 1 minute 30, 4 minutes 30, 6 minute 45, 9 minutes, 10 minute 30, and 13 minutes 30. The mini bosses always spawn at the same time, no matter what happens. 2 minutes 15, you get 1 mini boss. 5 minutes 15 into the game, you get 2 mini bosses. 8 minutes 15, you have 4 mini bosses, and 11 minutes 15, 4 mini bosses spawn. Belveth quests are random as well. As you can see, they were spawning at 3 minutes 55 in game 1, then in game 3, 4 minutes 21. In all of these games that I played, 3 Belveth quests spawned, along with 3 Yumis, but there have been a couple games where only 2 Belveth quests have spawned, and the final one that happens around the 12-13 minute mark hasn't happened. So I'm unsure what the reason for that would be. If it's a timing thing, you have to kill it quicker for the previous ones, but sometimes I've seen 2 over them 1, and that means you have 1 less card. The MFs are completely random as well. These seem to be the biggest randomness out of the whole list. As you can see in game 1, the first one spawned at 4 minutes 55. In game 4, 3 minutes. In game 5, it spawned at 2 minutes 12. Also in game 5, I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 MFs, whereas in all of the other games, I only had 4 MFs. So I don't know how these spawn or what's the reason for them. If it's a kill thing, random encounter, if it's an XP thing, no idea. There are a couple other timings to note here. 7:30, you got the bomb spawn, which I'll put on screen right now. These guys are very annoying. When you're playing early game and you haven't upgraded a lot of your stuff, these guys can be the death of a lot of your games, especially if you're playing a melee champ. It's best to take care of these with a range. So if you're going in with someone, just make sure if you're struggling, someone always brings a ranged champ. And then you've got the Gromp spawns at 12 minutes, and then they'll spawn again after 12 minutes. These are the things I mentioned earlier. These can be another reason why you die, especially a problem for melee champs. And then at 15 minutes, you have the boss. Now, on the top left, I've got a chart for everything that's spawning. I said I was going to explain it earlier, and here we are. So, you'll see 3 Belveths, 5 elites, and 11 mini-bosses in one game. So that equals 19 cards in total. You have 6 passives if you've unlocked all of your passives, and 6 times 5 is 30. You have 4 weapons, and then you have an ability, your auto-attack ability, which also can get to level 5, which is 25 in total, 5 times 5. But then you can also evolve your basic attack ability and your weapons, which adds another 5, which makes 60 in total, minus the 1 level that you start with in your passive, and you only need 59 levels to get max, which is why you need to be level 40 and kill and complete every Belveth trial to make 19 cards, meaning 59 total spawns on your screen that make you pick a card, and you will be maxed out fully. Now, there is a glitch right now where sometimes you can get too much XP and you'll level up twice in one go, and it will only let you pick 1 card. There's also another glitch where if you kill 2 bosses on top of each other, or you and your teammate pick up a card simultaneously from 2 separate bosses, it can count as only 1 card as well. Which is why there's been some circumstances in my games where I've got max level at 41, 42, and even 43. But I'm assuming this will be fixed. 40 should be the max level you should ever have to get to be fully maxed in this game. All right, well, that's pretty much it. That is my ultimate guide to Swarm. The only thing that I haven't really covered is the individual boss fights themselves and how to deal with them. I might make a separate video just how to fight every single boss individually, if any of you are struggling with that. But again, this is one of those games that you just need to keep playing, and the more that you go in and come out, you'll be stronger every single time. So I'm sure you'll all be able to do that. Anyway, when there's more information dropping about Swarm, more updates, I've heard news of like a non-time limited one, like a full-on wave survivor, just how long you can survive for instead of 15 minutes then a boss. If something like that drops, I'll be making videos on it. So yeah, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff, and I'll see you in a bit. Bye-bye.